A Navy SEAL survived the war, but something he loved never made it home with him. Far away, a mother kept waiting by the window, believing her son would return whole. A young nurse carried a letter into the battlefield without knowing she was carrying someone's last hope. In the middle of chaos, a German shepherd saw what no one else could and made a choice in a single second. That choice didn't just save a life. It changed the path of 3 lives forever, because sometimes the ones who guide us home are the ones we lose along the way. After you hear this story, tell me what stayed with you. And don't forget to like and subscribe to support more stories like this. The morning light over Brightwater Hollow arrived quietly, as it always did in the northern reaches of Minnesota, soft, pale, and deceptively gentle. It slid across the frozen surface of the lake beyond the trees, turning the ice into a sheet of dull silver. From a distance, the world looked untouched, peaceful, whole. Up close, the cold told a different story. Wind pressed faintly against the windows of North Lake Care Home, carrying with it the distant creak of trees bending under frost. Inside, warmth held steady, but the kind of warmth that came from routine rather than comfort. Radiators humming, soft slippers across polished floors, the smell of tea and disinfectant lingering in the air. By the eastern window sat Evelyn Shaw. She had chosen that seat long ago, and no one ever took it from her. The chair was slightly worn, the cushion shaped by years of quiet waiting. Evelyn herself was a small woman, no taller than 5'3", with silver hair always tied into a careful bun at the back of her head. Her skin carried the fine, delicate lines of age, but her eyes were steady, pale blue, still alert, still searching. Every morning she sat facing the lake. Every morning she asked the same question. "Is there a letter today?" Her voice was soft, almost fragile, but it never trembled. Standing beside her was Lena Whitmore. Lena was 29, with a quiet strength that didn't announce itself. She stood about 5'7", slender but grounded, the kind of build that came from long hours on her feet rather than deliberate training. Her brown hair was tied low at the nape of her neck, a few loose strands framing a face that carried both gentleness and restraint. Her skin was fair, but touched faintly by the cold of northern winters. And her eyes, gray-green, held a calm that patience trusted without knowing why. She wore her usual uniform, a light gray medical jacket over a soft knit sweater, practical trousers and boots built for slippery floors and icy paths. Nothing about her was dramatic. But there was something in the way she moved, deliberate, attentive, that made people feel seen. Lena didn't answer Evelyn right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Not new, not today's, but worn at the edges from being opened too many times. "No new letters this morning," Lena said gently, "but we still have this one." Evelyn's fingers shifted slightly on the armrest. Not disappointment, not quite, something softer. "Read it again," she said. Lena nodded, already unfolding the paper. The handwriting inside was firm, controlled, military neat, the kind of writing that didn't waste motion. "Mom," Lena began softly, "it's colder here than I expected. The kind of cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, it gets into your bones." Evelyn's eyes drifted toward the window as Lena read, but she wasn't looking at the lake anymore. She was somewhere else entirely. "I've got a partner out here," Lena continued. "Not human. Name's Rook. German Shepherd. Smarter than most people I've worked with. He doesn't talk much, but he doesn't have to." A faint, almost invisible smile touched Evelyn's lips. Lena kept reading. "He's the kind that knows when something's wrong before you do. Keeps his eyes on me like it's his job. Maybe it is." Lena paused just slightly, then continued. Don't worry about me. I'm not alone out here. Silence settled after the last line. Evelyn exhaled slowly. That dog, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. That dog will bring him back. Lena folded the letter carefully. You really believe that? She asked. Evelyn turned her head just enough to look at her. There was no uncertainty in her gaze. I don't believe in much anymore, she said, but I believe in that. Lena didn't argue, because somewhere, quietly, she understood. The rest of the morning moved as it always did. Medication rounds, quiet conversations, the low rhythm of lives winding gently toward stillness. Lena moved through it all with practiced ease, but her mind lingered on the letter, on the name. Rook. She had seen military dogs before. Years ago, in another life, she didn't talk about much anymore. Before Northlake, before she chose something quieter, before the night that still came back to her when she closed her eyes. A monitor flatlining, hands pressing down, a voice saying, "We lost him." Lena blinked, grounding herself in the present. She had left that world for a reason. And yet, at exactly 10:17 a.m., her phone vibrated in her pocket. The number wasn't saved, but she recognized the format instantly. Military. Her fingers hesitated before answering. This is Whitmore. A pause, then a voice clear and official. Lieutenant Lena Whitmore, this is Naval Personnel Command. You are being reactivated under Reserve Medical Directive. Immediate deployment. Alaska. The hallway around her seemed to narrow. Lena didn't speak. The voice continued. Report time, 48 hours. Details to follow. Acknowledge. For a moment, the past and present collided so sharply she couldn't separate them. The cold, the noise, the feeling of not being fast enough. Lena closed her eyes briefly. Acknowledged, she said. The call ended. And just like that, the life she had built, quiet, controlled, safe, shifted. When Lena returned to the east window, Evelyn was no longer looking at the lake. She was looking at Lena. Not the distant, drifting look of age, but focused, clear. You're leaving, Evelyn said. It wasn't a question. Lena froze. I didn't, she began, then stopped. Evelyn reached out, her hand small but steady, and took Lena's wrist. If you see him, she said softly, don't tell him I waited. Lena frowned slightly. What should I tell him? Evelyn's grip tightened just enough to be felt. Tell him, she said, her voice suddenly stronger than Lena had ever heard it, that I never stopped opening the window. For a brief second, something passed through the room. Something unexplainable. Not fear, not sadness, recognition. Then it was gone. Evelyn leaned back again, her gaze returning to the frozen lake as if nothing had happened. That afternoon, Lena packed in silence. Not much, just what was necessary. The rest of her life fit into routines that didn't travel. When she returned to Evelyn's room later, the older woman was resting, her breathing slow, even. On the bedside table lay a fresh envelope, unsealed. Lena picked it up. The handwriting was shakier than the older letters, but still careful. To Dorian. Lena hesitated. Then she slipped it into her bag. The next morning came brighter, colder. The lake shone under a thin layer of new ice, untouched, endless. Evelyn was already at the window. Is there a letter today? She asked. Lena smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Not yet, she said. Evelyn nodded. That's all right. She didn't ask anything else, because somehow she already knew. Outside, the wind moved across the frozen lake, leaving no trace of where it had been. Inside, a quiet promise had already begun its journey north. a thread invisible but unbroken. From a mother who waited, to a woman who would carry her words, to a soldier who did not yet know he was being called home, and to a dog who would decide how that story ended. The sky over the Alaskan coast did not welcome newcomers. It judged them. A wide expanse of pale gray stretched endlessly above the frozen shoreline, the kind of sky that erased distance and depth, until everything felt closer than it was, or farther. The wind came in long, steady breaths from the sea, carrying the sharp scent of salt and ice. It cut through layers of fabric as if they meant nothing. Lena Whitmore felt it the moment she stepped off the transport aircraft. The cold didn't touch her skin first. It went straight for her lungs. She paused at the base of the ramp, drawing in a slow breath, forcing her body to adjust. Around her, movement was constant, soldiers unloading crates, engines idling, voices cutting through the wind with clipped efficiency. No one lingered. No one looked around. Everything here had purpose. "Whitmore," the voice came from her right. Lena turned. The man walking toward her carried himself like someone who had stopped caring about appearances a long time ago. Travis Boone, 35, stood a little over 6 feet, his build thick with practical strength rather than gym training. His hair was cut short, uneven at the edges as if he trimmed it himself, already showing streaks of early gray. A thin scar ran from just beneath his left eye toward his cheekbone, old, clean, and permanent. His expression didn't change as he looked her over. "Reserve nurse," he said, not quite a question. "Lieutenant Lena Whitmore," she replied calmly. Travis gave a short nod, unimpressed. "You worked civilian last few years," he said. "Care home, right?" "Yes." His eyes narrowed slightly, not hostile, just measuring. "This isn't that." "I know." A pause. The wind filled it. Travis adjusted the strap of the heavy medical pack on his shoulder. "We'll see." He turned without another word. Lena followed. The forward aid unit sat near the edge of the base, a cluster of reinforced tents and mobile structures built to withstand both weather and chaos. Inside, heat blasted from portable units, creating a stark contrast to the frozen world outside. The smell hit her immediately. Antiseptic, metal, burnt fabric, memory. Lena pushed it down. Tables were already occupied. Injured personnel laid out under harsh white lights. Medics moving quickly, efficiently, without wasted motion. There was no panic here, only speed. "Gloves," Travis said, tossing her a pair. She caught them. "Stay close," he added. "You don't guess out here. You know or you ask." Lena nodded once. Understood. Within minutes she was working. A deep laceration on a forearm. Stabilize. Clean. Wrap. A soldier shaking from cold exposure. Monitor. Warm. Reassure. Her hands moved without hesitation. Whatever doubt Travis had brought with him, it began to fade, not all at once, but enough. Then the siren sounded, not loud, sharp, purposeful. "Transport incoming!" someone shouted. The tent shifted instantly, space cleared, stretchers readied. Lena turned toward the entrance just as the first team came through, and that was when she saw him. Dorian Shaw moved like the cold didn't touch him. He stood just over 6 feet tall, about 1.83 meters, with a build that carried no excess weight, only function. Lean muscle, trained for endurance, not display. His face was clean-shaven, exposing sharp lines, a square jaw, defined cheekbones, and a stillness that made him difficult to read. His skin was light but weathered by exposure, touched by the wind in a way that spoke of time spent outside more than inside. His dark brown hair was cut short in a military style, slightly longer than regulation, just enough to suggest he no longer adjusted himself for appearances. But it was his eyes that held attention. Gray-blue, cold but not empty, focused. He wore a worn olive-gray tactical combat shirt, the fabric softened with age, edges faintly frayed at the cuffs and shoulders. His brown-green combat pants showed signs of long use, knees worn, pockets slightly stretched. His boots were scuffed, his watch old, nothing about him was new. Everything about him worked. Beside him moved something else. Rook, a German shepherd around 4 to 5 years old. Large but built for speed rather than bulk. His coat carried the classic black and tan pattern, though dulled slightly by dust and exposure. Not a show dog, a working one. His ears stood upright, alert to everything. His eyes, deep amber, never stopped moving. He didn't pull at his harness, didn't bark. He observed every angle, every shift, every breath in the room. As Dorian guided a wounded soldier forward, Rook stayed half a step behind and to the side, positioned not by chance but by training. Lena felt something tighten in her chest, not fear, recognition. "Set him here," Travis ordered. Dorian helped lower the injured man onto the table, his movements precise, controlled. He didn't hover, didn't hesitate. Once the patient was stable, he stepped back immediately. Mission over. Task complete. Lena moved past him, focused on her work. But as she passed, Rook stopped, completely. His body stilled in a way that didn't match the movement around him. His head turned slowly, toward Lena. The noise of the tent seemed to fall away for a moment. Rook stepped forward, not aggressively, not uncertainly, deliberately. He lowered his head slightly, nostrils flaring, and inhaled near Lena's side, near the pocket where she kept the folded letter and the small cloth that still carried the faint scent of lavender from Northlake. His ears twitched, his gaze sharpened. Then for just a second, he looked at her, not as a stranger, as if placing her. Rook took one more step closer, close enough that Lena could feel the warmth of his breath through the cold air. Then, without warning, he sat, still, alert, facing her, not guarding, not reacting, waiting. It was the kind of behavior that didn't belong in the middle of a medical tent filled with chaos. Travis glanced over briefly. "What's he doing?" Dorian's eyes followed. For the first time his focus shifted, not to a threat, not to a command, to Lena. The moment stretched. Then Rook stood again, as if nothing had happened, and returned to position beside Dorian. The noise rushed back in, and whatever that moment had been, it passed. Dorian didn't speak. He gave a short nod to Travis, then turned and walked out. Rook followed. But just before disappearing through the tent flap, he glanced back once, at Lena. That night the bass settled into a quieter rhythm. Not silence, never silence, but something closer to it. Lena sat alone on a low bench outside the medical unit, her breath visible in the cold air. The sky above was darker now, though not fully black, northern light reflecting faintly off the snow. She held the letter in her hands, unopened, still. Footsteps approached, measured. She didn't need to look up. Dorian stopped a few feet away. Up close, he seemed even more still, like someone who had learned how to conserve not just energy, but presence. "That yours?" he asked. His voice was low, controlled. Lena lifted the envelope slightly. "No," she said. "It's yours." A pause. He didn't reach for it immediately. "From who?" Lena met his gaze. "Evelyn Shaw." Something shifted, small, but real. Dorian took the letter. His fingers brushed the paper once, as if confirming it was real. Then he stepped back, turning slightly away from her as he opened it. Rook sat beside him, silent, watching. Lena didn't move, didn't listen. She didn't need to. Some things weren't meant to be overheard. Minutes passed. When Dorian finished reading, he didn't fold the letter right away. He stood there looking at the final line. Then slowly he reached down and placed his hand on Rook's head. Not a command, not a signal, just contact. Rook leaned into it, just slightly. Enough. Dorian folded the letter once, carefully. "Thank you," he said. It was the first time his voice carried anything beyond function. Lena nodded. "She still sits by the window every morning," she said quietly. Dorian didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. The alarm cut through the night. Loud, urgent, different. Lights snapped on across the base. Voices rose. Movement accelerated. Travis appeared at the tent entrance. "Whitmore, gear up! We're moving!" Lena stood immediately. "What's the situation?" "Hostiles holding civilians near the coast. SEAL team going in. We're attached." Her pulse tightened. Not fear. Not exactly. Something sharper. Dorian was already moving. Rook at his side. Commander Ellis Vane stood near the briefing area. A tall man in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered, his presence carrying authority without effort. His hair, dark with streaks of gray, was cut clean. His eyes were steady, hardened by years of decisions that didn't come with good options. "Primary objective," Vane said, voice cutting through the noise. "Extract civilians. Minimal engagement if possible, but if it's not..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Dorian adjusted the strap on his gear. No hesitation, no question. Rook stood ready. Lena stepped into position with the medical unit, not behind them, not outside of it, with them. As the transport vehicles rolled toward the edge of the base, the world outside returned to that same endless white, silent, waiting. Lena sat across from Dorian. Between them, Rook rested low but alert, his body still, his eyes moving. For a brief moment, Lena thought of a window, of a woman sitting beside it, of a promise carried north through frozen air. Dorian looked forward, not at her, not at anything behind him, only ahead, but his hand rested lightly against Rook's back, and for the first time, he didn't look like someone who was entirely alone. The vehicles didn't stop until the world turned gray. Not the soft gray of morning light over a lake, but the hard industrial gray of metal, ash, and abandoned things left too long in the cold. The coastal industrial zone stretched ahead like a broken machine. Rusted shipping containers leaned at unnatural angles, their sides torn open by time or force. Cranes stood frozen in place, skeletal against the sky. Snow had settled unevenly across everything, covering danger just enough to make it invisible. The convoy halted behind a collapsed concrete barrier. Engines cut, silence returned. Not true silence, never that, but the kind that made every sound sharper. Commander Ellis Vane stood at the front, his gloved hands resting on a digital map. His voice came low, controlled but absolute. "Target zone is 200 meters inland. Hostiles confirmed. Civilians likely held below ground level." He looked up. "Minimal noise, minimal exposure. We move fast." Dorian gave a short nod. No questions, no hesitation. He checked his gear with quick, practiced movements. Beside him, Rook adjusted his stance slightly, muscles coiling beneath his thick coat, ready. Lena stood just behind Travis, pulling her gloves tighter. This was no longer controlled, no longer contained. This was the part she had tried to leave behind. They moved, boots crunching lightly over frozen ground, each step placed with intent. The air smelled wrong, not just cold, burnt, metallic. Something had happened here recently. Lena kept close to Travis, her eyes scanning as much as she could while staying focused on her role. Every instinct told her to look everywhere at once. That was how people made mistakes. "Stay on me," Travis muttered without turning. "You drift, you're dead." "I'm not drifting," Lena replied quietly. "Good." He didn't look back. but the slight shift in his tone told her he believed her. The first shot came from nowhere, a sharp crack that split the air just long enough to register before everyone dropped. "Sniper!" someone hissed. Dorian moved instantly, pulling a soldier down behind a steel crate. Rook dropped low, body pressed to the ground, ears forward, eyes tracking. No barking, no panic, only calculation. Lena felt her pulse spike, but her hands didn't shake, not this time. "Left sector!" a voice called. Another shot, closer. Rook's head snapped to the right, then, without warning, he lunged forward, not far, just enough. His body slammed into Dorian's side. The bullet struck the metal behind where Dorian's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. The sound rang through the space. Dorian didn't react outwardly, but his hand found Rook's shoulder for a brief second. Acknowledgement. Then he moved. They pushed forward, shifting angles, using the maze of containers and machinery for cover. Inside one of the warehouse corridors, the air changed again. Heavier. Still. Rook slowed, not stopped. Slowed. His nose lifted slightly. Then he halted. Completely. Dorian raised a hand. The team froze. Lena watched as Rook took one careful step forward, then another, his body lowering slightly, tension building along his spine. "What is it?" Travis whispered. Dorian didn't answer. He crouched beside Rook, eyes scanning the floor. At first, Lena saw nothing, then a line. Too straight, too deliberate. A thin wire nearly invisible against the frost-covered concrete. Tripwire. Explosive. "Back," Dorian said quietly. The team shifted, slow, controlled. The wire trembled slightly in the wind. One wrong step. Gone. Lena exhaled slowly, barely aware she had been holding her breath. Rook didn't move until everyone was clear. Then he stepped back beside Dorian as if the moment had never happened. "Not instinct," Dorian said under his breath as they moved again. Lena glanced at him. "Training," he added, "and repetition." His voice remained even, but there was something else there. Respect. Not just for the dog, for the partnership. Further in, the fighting intensified. Gunfire echoed through narrow corridors, the sound bouncing off metal and concrete, distorting direction. Lena dropped beside a wounded soldier, her hands already moving. Pressure, wrap, stabilize. "Stay with me," she said firmly. The soldier, a young man barely more than 20, nodded weakly. His name patch read Milo Keene. His face still held traces of youth beneath the dirt and strain. Light brown hair matted with sweat, pale skin drawn tight with pain, eyes wide but trying to stay focused. "I'm not dying, right?" he asked. Lena met his gaze. "Not today," she said. Her tone didn't leave room for doubt. Milo swallowed, holding on to that certainty like it mattered more than anything else. They moved again, deeper, toward the structure at the center of the zone. The remains of a church. It didn't belong here, not among steel and rust, but there it stood. Its wooden frame battered, windows shattered, one side partially collapsed. Snow had drifted through the broken openings, collecting along the warped floorboards. "Thermal scans confirm movement below," Travis said. "Civilians," Dorian replied. "And hostiles." A pause. The weight of the decision settled over them. If they pulled back, the civilians stayed. If they pushed forward, they risked everything. Rook moved first, not forward, not back. He turned, toward Lena. The movement was small but deliberate. He stepped closer to her, placing himself between her and the open entrance of the church. Then he looked up at Dorian and held that look, longer than necessary, long enough to feel like something more than training. Dorian frowned slightly. For a split second, the battlefield disappeared. There was only that look, That silent exchange, then Rook turned back toward the church. Ready, as if the decision had already been made. Lena felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not courage, something quieter, certainty. She stepped forward. "I'm going," she said. Travis looked at her. "You don't have to." "I know." A beat. Then he nodded once. "Stay close." Inside, the air was colder. Still, the kind of stillness that came from something being wrong. Their boots creaked against the wooden floor as they moved through the broken interior. Snow crunched underfoot. The faint outline of old pews remained, some overturned, others splintered. A staircase led down, dark, narrow. Dorian took point, Rook beside him. Lena followed behind Travis, every sense sharpened, every movement measured. The smell hit halfway down, damp, human, fear, voices, faint, below, children. Dorian raised a hand. The team halted. Then, movement. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, armed. The first shot came fast. Then everything broke open. Gunfire filled the stairwell. Tight space, no room to breathe. Dorian moved like he had done this 1,000 times. Angles, positioning, control. Rook stayed tight to him, shifting with every change in direction. Lena dropped low as Travis pulled a wounded man back. "Stay down!" he barked. She didn't argue, didn't hesitate. Her hands found the injury before her mind fully processed it. Blood, warm, real, she worked. Because that was the only thing she could control. Minutes passed, or seconds. Time lost meaning. Then, silence. Sudden, heavy. Dorian lowered his weapon slightly. "Clear," he said. The word echoed. In the corner of the basement, huddled together, civilians, women, children, eyes wide, terrified, but alive. Lena moved toward them immediately. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe now." A small girl reached out, her hand trembling. Lena took it, held it, steady. Behind her, Rook stood watch. Not relaxed, never relaxed, but still, present. Dorian scanned the room one last time, then looked toward the exit. The mission wasn't over, not yet. But something had shifted, not just in the room, in him. He glanced at Lena, at the way she held the child's hand, at the way she didn't look away, then down at Rook. His hand rested briefly against the dog's back, grounding, familiar, real. "Move," Dorian said, and this time, they moved together. The church should have been a place of stillness. Instead, it breathed like something wounded. Wind pushed through shattered stained glass, scattering pale light across the warped wooden floor. Snow had gathered in uneven drifts along the edges of the room, melting slowly into dark stains that spread across the boards. The old pews stood crooked, some overturned, others splintered where bullets or time had torn through them. Nothing here felt sacred anymore, only exposed, only fragile. "Split teams," Dorian said quietly. His voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. The men around him moved immediately, guided not by volume but by certainty. "Boone, take point on evac prep, keep them stable." Travis nodded once. "Got it." Dorian turned slightly. "Whitmore, with me." Lena didn't hesitate. She stepped forward. Behind her, the civilians huddled together. Faces pale, eyes wide, bodies pulled close as if warmth could be created by proximity alone. Among them were 3 children, no older than 10, their movements small and uncertain. As if the world had become something unpredictable overnight. One of them, a girl with tangled blonde hair and a coat too thin for the cold, clutched a piece of cloth in her hand, twisting it tightly as Lena passed. Lena slowed just enough to meet her gaze. "We're getting you out," she said softly. The girl didn't answer, but she nodded. The secondary staircase was narrow, steep. The wood creaked under their weight as they descended into the lower level of the structure. The temperature dropped immediately, the air heavier, damp, carrying the scent of earth and something else. Something recently disturbed. Rook slowed first, his body lowered slightly, his movements tightening into precision. Dorian noticed instantly. "Hold," he murmured. Lena froze behind him. Rook moved one step forward, then angled slightly to the left, nose low, ears flicking as he processed something unseen. Dorian crouched, scanning the ground. At first it looked like nothing, just broken planks and scattered debris. Then a pressure plate, crude but effective, half hidden beneath a loose board wired to something deeper beneath the floor. "Step back," Dorian said. Lena exhaled slowly, shifting her weight carefully, her boots avoiding the unstable surface. Travis, still above with the main group, called down softly. "What do you see?" "Trigger setup," Dorian replied. "Not amateur." That meant something. This wasn't just chaos. It was planned. They adjusted their path, moving along the narrow edge where the wood still held. Each step calculated, each breath controlled. Rook moved ahead again, but slower now, his focus absolute. There was no hesitation in him, only direction. At the base of the stairs, the space opened slightly. Low ceiling, concrete walls, dim light filtering through cracks above, and movement. Hostiles. 2 of them, positioned near a makeshift barricade of overturned furniture and metal scraps. Dorian raised 2 fingers. Rook shifted. Then, everything happened at once. The first shot broke the silence. Dorian moved with it, not after it. Precise. Direct. The second hostile turned. Too late. The sound of gunfire echoed harshly against the concrete, compressing the space into something tighter, smaller. Then, stillness. Again. "Clear," Dorian said. Lena moved forward immediately. Not toward the fight. Toward the living. Behind the barricade, more civilians. A woman in her 30s, dark hair matted, face pale beneath streaks of dirt, held a young boy close against her side. Her posture was protective, rigid, as if her body alone could shield him from everything. Her name, Lena would later learn, was Clara Voss. She had the look of someone who had been strong for too long without rest. Tall but drawn inward now, her shoulders slightly curved, her movements cautious. Her hands trembled as she tried to soothe the boy, but her voice remained steady. "He's okay," she whispered. Though her eyes said she wasn't sure, the boy, no more than 6, pressed his face into her coat, silent. Lena knelt beside them. "I'm Lena," she said gently. "You're safe now." Clara's eyes searched her face, for truth, for something real. After a moment, she nodded. Behind Lena, Rook stood near the center of the room, not idle, never idle. His body angled slightly toward the far wall where the light was weakest. Dorian noticed. He always noticed. Rook took a step forward, then another, slow, intentional. His nose lifted slightly, catching something in the air that no one else seemed to register. He stopped near a section of the wall that looked no different from the rest. Cold concrete, damp, unremarkable. Then he pawed once, sharp, deliberate. The sound echoed. Dorian's gaze sharpened. He stepped closer, running his hand along the surface. There, a seam, barely visible, a hidden access panel behind it. Movement, faint. Dorian's jaw tightened. "They're not done," he said quietly. For a brief moment, the rescue felt incomplete, unfinished. "Back," Dorian ordered. Lena guided Clara and the boy away, her movements calm but urgent. Rook held position, watching, waiting. The panel burst open. Another hostile emerged, weapon raised. But Dorian was already there. The exchange was fast, controlled, final. When it ended, the room fell silent again. This time heavier, because now they knew. The danger hadn't been obvious, it had been hidden. "Area secure," Travis called from above as he began moving the first group out. Dorian exhaled slowly, then turned. "Start evac." The movement upward was slower, careful. Each civilian guided, supported, kept low and close. Lena stayed with the children, her voice steady, her presence anchoring them to something safe in the middle of chaos. The small blonde girl from earlier clung to her sleeve now, refusing to let go. "That's okay," Lena whispered. "You can hold on." Halfway up, a sharp cry cut through the stairwell. "Milo!" Lena turned. He was down again, his leg giving out beneath him, blood seeping through the bandage. Travis cursed under his breath, moving back toward him. "He won't make it up like this," he said. Dorian looked between the stairwell and the exit. Time, distance, risk. The calculation formed instantly. Stay on schedule or go back. For a fraction of a second, no one moved. Then, Rook did. He turned sharply, moving back down the stairs without command, directly toward Milo, stopping beside him, standing there, waiting. Dorian exhaled once. Decision made. "Get him up," he said. Travis didn't argue. Lena was already moving. They adjusted formation, slower now. More exposed, but no one left behind. When they reached the main floor again, the light felt harsher, colder. Outside, the wind had picked up, sweeping across the open ground beyond the church. Snow lifted in thin sheets, obscuring distance, visibility dropping. Dorian stepped toward the entrance, then stopped, his gaze fixed on the open expanse beyond. Something wasn't right. Too quiet, too still. Rook moved beside him, then froze. His entire body went rigid, every line of him tightening into alertness. Dorian followed his gaze, out across the frozen stretch beyond the church. At first, Lena saw nothing, just white, endless. Then, shapes. Dark, low, spaced too evenly, her breath caught. "Charges," Travis said quietly, a set in a pattern. The realization settled in. The path back, the most direct route, was wired, not random, not scattered, deliberate. Whoever had set this had expected them to leave this way. Dorian's eyes narrowed slightly. Not anger, not fear, focus. "They're hurting us," he said. Lena felt the weight of it. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a trap. Behind them, the civilians gathered close, unaware of the full danger, but sensing enough to stay silent. The small girl tightened her grip on Lena's sleeve. "What's happening?" she whispered. Lena looked down at her, then back at the frozen field, then at Dorian, and for the first time since stepping into Alaska, she understood exactly where she stood. Not behind the line, not outside it, inside it. Dorian stepped forward slightly. Rook moved with him. The wind carried across the ice, erasing edges, blurring distance. Every step from here would matter. "New route," Dorian said, his voice steady, final, no hesitation left. Behind him, Lena adjusted her grip on the child's hand. Travis shifted Milo's weight more securely. The team tightened formation, and in that moment, no one was separate anymore. Not soldier, not medic, not civilian, just people moving through something that didn't care if they made it out. Dorian glanced down briefly. Rook stood ready, unmoving, watching, the same as always, the same as ever. "Stay close," Dorian said. And this time, they all did. The wind erased footprints as quickly as they formed. Snow moved sideways across the open ground, thin sheets of white sliding over ice like something alive. The world beyond the broken church had lost its edges. Distance blurred, sound carried strangely, and every shadow looked deeper than it should. They stepped into it anyway. Dorian moved first, Rook beside him, always beside him. Behind them, the formation tightened. Travis supporting Milo's weight, Lena guiding the civilians, her voice low and steady, keeping them moving, keeping them focused. "Eyes down," Travis muttered. "Follow exactly." No one argued, no one questioned, because out here, One mistake wasn't a mistake. It was an ending. The pattern of explosives stretched across the frozen ground. Like something deliberate, charges set in intervals partially buried beneath ice and snow, nearly invisible unless you knew how to look. Dorian did. So did Rook. Rook's pace changed, not slower, not faster, but sharper. Each step placed with intent, his body angled slightly ahead of Dorian, scanning, reading the terrain through scent, vibration, subtle differences in the frozen surface. Left, Dorian said quietly. They adjusted. Hold. They froze. A breath, then forward again. Behind them, the civilians followed, their trust fragile but absolute. Clara Voss kept her son close, one arm wrapped around him as if she could shield him from the cold itself. Her face had lost some of its fear, replaced now with something steadier, determination born from survival. Lena stayed with them, one hand guiding the small, blonde girl who refused to let go of her sleeve. "You're doing great," Lena whispered. The girl nodded, though her fingers trembled. Gunfire cracked in the distance, not random, not scattered, measured. "They're repositioning," Travis said under his breath. Dorian didn't respond. His focus remained forward, always forward. They reached the edge of a collapsed loading platform. Metal twisted, concrete fractured, ice forming in jagged sheets between broken beams. Beyond it, a narrow stretch of clearer ground. Their best chance. Dorian stepped forward, then stopped. Rook's body went rigid, not alert, locked. Every muscle tightened at once. Dorian's eyes narrowed. "Wait," he said. The word cut through everything. A single sound followed, faint, almost lost in the wind, a click, not loud, but wrong. "Back!" Travis barked. Too late. The explosion didn't come immediately. It came just slow enough to understand. The ground beneath the platform shifted, then Rook moved. He didn't hesitate, didn't look. He drove forward, slamming his weight into Dorian's side, hard, enough to knock him completely off balance. Dorian hit the ground, sliding across the ice, and then the blast came. The shockwave tore through the space where he had been standing. Metal screamed, ice shattered. Fragments tore through the air, sharp and fast and unforgiving. The world collapsed into noise. Lena dropped instinctively, covering the child beneath her. Travis pulled Milo down, shielding him with his own body. The blast rolled past them, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, "Move!" Dorian's voice cut through the haze. He was already pushing himself up, disoriented but alive. "Keep moving!" "Rook." Dorian turned. Rook lay several feet away, his body twisted unnaturally against the ice, his harness torn along one side, dark spreading beneath him too quickly to ignore. Dorian's breath caught, but only for a fraction of a second. There was no time. Not yet. "Go!" he ordered. Travis didn't argue. Lena didn't look back. They moved because they had to. The gunfire intensified. Closer now. Rounds cutting through the snow around them, sharp and precise. Dorian dropped to one knee, returning fire in controlled bursts, buying seconds, only seconds for the others to reach cover. "Signal point! 50 meters!" Someone shouted over comms. Dorian shifted position, then moved again. Rook didn't stay down. Through the noise, through the cold, through the pain, he pushed himself up, slow, unsteady, but standing. He limped, but he moved, toward Dorian. Rook reached him just as Dorian reloaded. For a split second, everything else fell away. The gunfire, the wind, the chaos, there was only that moment. Rook stood beside him, his breathing uneven, his body trembling under the strain, but his eyes were the same, focused, steady, unbroken. Dorian's hand found the side of his neck. Not checking, not commanding, just there. Then Rook turned his head, toward the distance, toward the signal point, and stepped forward, as if nothing had happened. Dorian followed. They reached the final stretch, an open clearing just beyond the wreckage, exposed but necessary. The extraction point. No cover, no margin. Dorian dropped the flare from his vest, his fingers closing around it with practiced certainty. "On my mark," he said. The team tightened. The civilians crouched low, the world narrowed. "Mark!" The flare ignited in a burst of red light, cutting through the white-gray storm like a wound in the sky. Dorian fired it upward. The signal arced high, trailing smoke. For a moment, nothing. Then, the distant sound of rotors, faint at first, then growing. "Bird inbound!" came over comms. The gunfire surged again, desperate now. The enemy knew what the flare meant. They pushed harder, faster, closer. Dorian held position, returning fire, controlling angles, holding the line. Rook stayed with him, still moving, still fighting, even as his steps faltered. The helicopter broke through the storm above them, its shape emerging from the gray like something unreal. Low, fast, precise. "Go! Go!" Travis shouted. The team moved, one by one. Civilians first, then Milo, then Lena. Dorian stayed last, Rook beside him. As the final civilian climbed aboard, Dorian turned. "Move!" he ordered. Rook took one step, then collapsed. Dorian caught him before he hit the ground. Inside the helicopter, everything became smaller, closer. The noise compressed. The world narrowed to a single point. "Set him here!" Lena's voice cut through the chaos. Her hands were already moving, pressing, assessing, working. Travis dropped beside her, opening his kit. "Shrapnel, multiple entry points," he said. "Internal bleeding, bad." Lena didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her hands told the story. Rook's breathing was shallow, irregular, his chest rising just enough to count, just enough to hope. Dorian knelt beside him, still, silent. His hand rested against Rook's neck again. The same place, the same contact. "Stay with me," Lena murmured. Though she didn't know if the words were for the dog or for herself, she worked faster, more precise. Everything she had, everything she knew, poured into those seconds. Rook's eyes shifted, slowly. They found Dorian. Time stretched. Dorian leaned closer. His voice, when it came, was lower than it had ever been. Not a command, not a statement, something else. "I'm here." Rook's paw moved. Barely. It lifted, just enough, and rested against Dorian's hand. The contact held. For a moment, a single moment that carried everything they had been through. Every step, every mission, every silent understanding. Then, it slipped. Lena stopped. Not because she chose to, because there was nothing left to do. The helicopter continued forward, cutting through the storm. Inside, no one spoke. No one moved. Dorian didn't look away, not even once. Outside, the white world stretched endlessly, unchanged, unaware. Inside, something had ended and something else had been taken with it. The base was louder than the battlefield, not with gunfire, not with explosions, but with voices. Too many voices. Engines roared in the distance. Boots struck concrete in steady rhythm. Radios crackled with overlapping reports, success, extraction, casualty counts, confirmations. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly, the kind of laughter that didn't come from humor, but from release. They called it a clean operation, a success, a recovery. The words moved through the base like something rehearsed, passed from one voice to another until they lost meaning. Dorian Shaw heard them all, and none of them reached him. He walked through it without slowing, still wearing the same worn olive-gray combat shirt, darkened now in places where blood had dried into the fabric. His brown-green combat pants carried new tears along the knee. His boots left faint marks across the concrete floor, damp from melted snow. He looked exactly as he had in the field, only quieter. if that was possible. A young officer intercepted him near the operations tent. Lieutenant Mark Ellery, mid-20s, tall but not fully settled into his frame yet, with neatly trimmed blonde hair and a face that still carried the last traces of academy discipline. Clean, structured, eager to do things correctly. "Chief Shaw," Ellery said, slightly breathless, as if he had been looking for him. "Command wants to debrief you. Also, they're putting together a commendation review. What you did out there." "No." Dorian didn't stop walking. Ellery blinked. "Sir? I'm not interested." The words weren't harsh. They weren't emotional. They were final. Ellery hesitated, clearly unsure whether to insist or step back. He chose the latter because something in Dorian's posture made it clear. This wasn't a conversation. Inside the medical unit, the noise dropped. Not entirely, but enough. Lena sat at one of the steel tables, her sleeves rolled slightly, hands still faintly stained despite multiple washes. Her posture was upright, but her shoulders carried a subtle weight, as if something inside her hadn't fully settled back into place. Across from her, Travis Boone leaned against a support beam, arms crossed, watching the controlled chaos of medics moving between beds. "You held up," he said after a moment. Lena didn't look up. "I did my job." Travis gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "That's not what I meant." She glanced at him briefly. There was no challenge in his eyes now, only acknowledgement. Then, the flap at the entrance shifted. Dorian stepped inside. The room didn't react, but Lena did. Not visibly, but something in her attention shifted toward him. Dorian moved toward the far side of the room. There was a table there, empty. Except for one thing. The harness. It had been cleaned, carefully. But not enough to erase what had happened. The dark fabric still carried faint discoloration along one side, where the blast had torn through it. The metal rings were scratched, one slightly bent. The straps hung loose, no longer shaped by the body they had once fitted perfectly. Dorian stopped in front of it. Didn't touch it. At first. Behind him, Lena stood. She didn't approach immediately, didn't speak. She understood something instinctively. This was not a moment to interrupt. Dorian reached out slowly. His fingers closed around the edge of the harness, not gripping, just holding, as if testing whether it still existed. His mind didn't replay the explosion. Not first. It went further back. Cold nights. Rook lying just inside the entrance of a temporary shelter, always positioned between him and whatever lay beyond. The steady rhythm of breathing in the dark. The way Rook would shift slightly if Dorian moved, even in sleep. A mission in another place years earlier. Dust instead of snow, heat instead of cold, gunfire cutting through a narrow street. Dorian pinned behind cover, Rook circling back against command to draw fire away. The moments didn't come in order. They didn't need to. They all led to the same place. Dorian's grip tightened slightly on the harness for a brief second. He felt it. Not the weight of the fabric, not the cold of the metal. Something else, familiar. The pressure of a body leaning against his leg. The quiet presence that had always been there without needing to be seen. It lasted less than a heartbeat, then it was gone. The room returned, the noise returned, but something inside him didn't. "You should sit," Lena said softly. Dorian didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. She stepped closer, not too close, just enough. In her hand was something small, wrapped, carefully. "The collar," she said. Her voice was steady but quieter now. "They found it near the impact zone." Dorian looked at it, then at her. For a moment there was something unguarded in his eyes. Not weakness, not collapse, recognition. He took it. The leather was worn, old, edges softened by time. The metal tag attached to it carried scratches, the engraved letters dulled but still visible. He turned it slightly in his fingers, reading something only he could see. Lena didn't speak. She reached into her jacket instead, pulled out something else, a photograph. She held it out. "This is from your mother." Dorian hesitated, then took it. Evelyn sat by a window. The same window. Her hands folded in her lap, her posture straight despite her age. Light from outside fell across her face, softening the lines but not erasing them. She was looking at something beyond the frame. Waiting. Dorian stared at the image, longer than he had intended to. "She still sits there every morning," Lena said quietly. The room seemed to shrink, not physically but in feeling. Everything else, voices, movement, sound, faded just enough to make space for something else. Dorian lowered himself into the chair behind him, slow, deliberate, the harness still in one hand, the photograph in the other. He didn't speak, didn't move, then something shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was small, almost invisible. His shoulders dropped, just slightly. The tension he carried, not in muscle but in something deeper, gave way. His hand tightened around the photograph. And for the first time since the helicopter, his breathing changed. Lena didn't look away. She stayed, not offering comfort, not trying to fix anything, just present. That was enough. Outside, the base continued its rhythm, reports finalized, equipment reset, people moved on because that was what survival demanded. Inside, time slowed. A medic passed by briefly, placing a clipboard on the table. "Medical clearance pending," he said. "Transport out in 12 hours. Dorian nodded once. Automatic. Lena stepped back slightly. "You don't have to go alone," she said. Dorian looked up. "I'm assigned to the return transport," she added. "Medical escort." A pause. He considered that, not in words, not in logic, but in something quieter. Then he nodded. Once. Agreement. The room settled again. Hours passed. When the time came, the transport aircraft stood ready at the edge of the base, its engines already warming the air around it. The sky had darkened slightly, though the horizon still held that strange northern glow. Dorian walked toward it without looking back, the harness secured to his pack, the collar in his pocket, the photograph held. Lena walked beside him, not leading, not following, just there. Behind them, the base continued on, unchanged, ahead, only distance, and something waiting at the end of it, not closure, not yet, but a beginning of something that had not been there before. The road back to Minnesota felt longer than the one that had taken him away. Not because of distance, but because of what he carried now. The air was different, colder, yes, but softer. The kind of cold that belonged to memory rather than danger. Pine trees lined the narrow road leading toward Brightwater Hollow, their branches heavy with snow, bending but unbroken. The frozen lake beyond them stretched wide and pale, reflecting a sky that held more light than shadow. Nothing here looked like war, nothing here sounded like it. And yet, Dorian Shaw stepped out of the vehicle like a man who hadn't fully left it behind. His boots touched the ground slowly, deliberately, as if testing whether this place still existed the way he remembered. The same worn olive-gray shirt, the same scuffed boots. But something in him had changed, not visible, not obvious, but present. Beside him, Lena Whitmore closed the passenger door quietly. She looked at the care home ahead, Northlake Care Home, its structure modest, warm in a way that didn't rely on strength, but on time. Yellow light glowed faintly through the windows, soft against the winter air. She adjusted her coat slightly, her breath visible as she exhaled. "You ready?" she asked. Dorian didn't answer right away. He looked at the building, then at the window, the one facing the lake. "She'll be there," Lena said gently. Dorian nodded once. Inside, the air smelled the same. Tea, clean linen, something steady, something human. A nurse at the front desk looked up as they entered. Margaret Cole, late 50s, a woman with short gray hair cut neatly around her ears, her posture upright, her movements efficient. Her face carried the kind of quiet kindness that came from years of caring for others without expecting anything in return. Her eyes softened when she saw Lena. "You're back," she said. Lena nodded. "And him?" Margaret looked toward Dorian, studying him briefly, not judging, not questioning, just understanding. "He's been expected," she said softly. They didn't wait, didn't need to. The hallway felt longer than it should have, or maybe time had changed its shape. Dorian walked ahead now, his steps steady but slower than usual. Each step carried something heavier than weight. Memory. At the end of the hall, the window. Evelyn Shaw sat in her chair, exactly where she always had been. Her silver hair was tied into the same careful bun, her small frame wrapped in a soft sweater and shawl, hands resting lightly in her lap. She was looking out at the lake. She didn't turn immediately, didn't react to the sound of footsteps because she didn't need to. "You took your time," she said. Her voice was calm, certain. Dorian stopped, just behind her. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then, "I made it back." Evelyn nodded slightly, as if that had never been in doubt. She turned slowly, her pale blue eyes settled on him. And for the first time, there was no distance in them, no searching, only recognition. She studied his face, the lines, the stillness, the absence. Then she asked the question, the one that had always been waiting. "Where is Rook?" The room shifted, not physically, but in feeling. Lena stood back near the doorway, silent, present, but not part of this moment. Dorian's hand tightened slightly at his side, not visibly, but enough. He didn't look away, didn't soften it, didn't change it. "He didn't make it back," Dorian said. Silence followed. Not heavy, not breaking, just there. Evelyn held his gaze, longer than most people could, longer than most would try. Then she nodded. "Once. That dog," she said quietly, "didn't take you from me." Dorian didn't move. "It brought you back." The words settled, not like comfort, not like explanation, but like something that had always been true. Waiting to be said. Dorian exhaled, slowly. "I should have," he began. Evelyn raised her hand, stopping him. "No," she said. Her voice was gentle but firm. "There is nothing you should have done differently." For a moment, he looked like he might argue, like the weight he carried needed to be justified, but he didn't, because something in her tone left no room for it. Evelyn reached out. Her hand, small, worn with time, rested lightly against Dorian's wrist, not holding, not pulling, just there. "Do you hear it?" she asked softly. Dorian frowned slightly. "Hear what?" She turned her gaze back toward the window, toward the frozen lake, toward the line of trees beyond. "The quiet," she said. He listened, really listened, for the first time since returning. The wind, soft, steady, the faint creak of trees, distant, unhurried, nothing else. "It's not empty," Evelyn said. "It's just waiting for you to notice it again." For a brief moment, something shifted inside him, not healed, not fixed, but opened. That was enough. Later they walked to the lake. The snow was deeper near the edge, untouched except for a narrow path that curved between the trees. The air carried that same quiet Evelyn had spoken of, something that didn't demand attention but rewarded it. Dorian walked ahead this time, in his hands, a small container, simple, unmarked. Lena followed at a distance, not far, not close, exactly where she needed to be. They stopped beneath a line of tall pines, their branches stretched upward, dark against the pale sky, steady against the wind. Dorian knelt, the motion slow, intentional. He opened the container. The world didn't change, didn't react, he didn't speak, didn't need to. He let the ash fall, carried by the wind, disappearing into the snow, into the earth, into the place where stillness lived. For a moment, he stayed there, kneeling, not moving. Then, he stood. Lena stepped closer, not saying anything, not offering anything, just there. That was enough. Days passed, not quickly, not slowly, just forward. Dorian didn't change all at once, didn't wake up different, didn't leave the weight behind, but he began small things, standing by the window, not just passing it, stopping, looking, sitting with Evelyn, not speaking, but staying, walking outside without purpose, just to feel the air. Lena remained, not as a visitor, not as a caretaker, something else, something quieter. Together they began building something, not from plans, not from orders, but from need. The idea came without announcement, without decision, a place for people like him, for people who had come back, but not entirely, and dogs not as tools, not as assets, but as something more. They called it Rook House, a place where veterans could work with trained dogs, learn trust again, learn presence again, learn something that couldn't be taught with words. It started small, one room, then two, then more. People came, some stayed, some didn't, but it existed. That was enough. One evening, as the light faded across the frozen lake, Dorian stood alone near the edge of the trees. The sky carried that same soft gray blue, the kind that didn't end the day but held it in place a little longer. He stood still, hands at his sides, breathing slow. The wind moved gently across the surface of the lake, and then a sound, faint, behind him, not loud, not clear, a step. Dorian didn't turn immediately. For a moment, he simply listened. Then he turned. Nothing, only snow, only trees, only quiet. He stood there, looking. Then, slowly, he smiled, not because something had returned, not because something had been proven, but because, for the first time, he didn't need to see it. The quiet remained, and this time, he didn't feel alone in it. At the end of this story, what remains is not the sound of gunfire, nor the memory of loss, but something quieter and far more powerful. The reminder that love, loyalty, and sacrifice are never wasted. Rook did not just save Dorian's life in a single moment. He stayed with him through fear, through silence, through everything Dorian could not face alone. And in the end, what looked like loss was, in truth, a different kind of miracle. Not the kind that prevents pain, but the kind that carries us through it. Sometimes God does not remove us from the storm. Sometimes He sends someone to walk beside us in it. A companion, a friend, a soul that understands without words. And when that companion is gone, what remains is not emptiness but a path back to life. Dorian came home not because the war ended, but because something greater than fear called him back. Through his mother's unwavering faith, through Lena's quiet presence, and through Rook's final act of love, he was given another chance, not just to survive, but to feel again. In our own lives, we all face moments where we feel lost, numb, or disconnected. We may not be on a battlefield, but we carry our own silent battles every day. And just like Dorian, sometimes we don't realize we're being guided back, step, by something greater than ourselves. Maybe it's a person who refuses to give up on us. Maybe it's a small sign we almost ignore. Maybe it's a quiet voice telling us to keep going. Or maybe It's God, working through the people in moments we least expect. So if you're watching this today, take a moment to reflect. Who has been your rook? Who has stood beside you when you couldn't stand on your own? And more importantly, who can you be that person for? If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what part stayed with you the most, and if you believe in stories that heal. Consider subscribing to the channel so we can continue bringing you moments like this. May God bless you, guide your path, and bring peace to whatever battles you are facing right now.